I'm Annemarie Lean-Vercoe and I'm a cinematographer.
Hello and welcome to Art, the podcast where we get to know women from around the world of visual arts. I'm Chris Stafford and this is Season 3, Episode 16. My guest this week is the British award-winning and BAFTA-nominated cinematographer Annemarie Lean-Vercoe. Annemarie most recently lensed Outrageous, which follows the lives of the fascinating Mitford sisters. The show premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival in June 2025 and will be airing this summer on UK TV and BritBox TV. Annemarie is a graduate of the National Film and Television School with film and TV credits as cinematographer or director of photography spanning more than 26 years. These include Call the Midwife, Breeders, The Chelsea Detective, All Creatures Great and Small, the BAFTA winner Suffragettes with Lucy Worsley, and BAFTA-nominated Is There Anybody Out There? Annemarie was born in Devon, England in 1977 and has an older sister and step-siblings. Her parents divorced when she was just 4, but remarried locally and remained close by, providing Annemarie with an extended family. In his second career, her father was a sailing photographer who introduced her to cameras, and she soon developed a curiosity as to what was possible behind the lens. She enjoyed an idyllic childhood with freedom to explore the surrounding countryside, learning to ride ponies and how to sail. After Yelpton Primary School, Annemarie attended the Royal School in Bath, but left early to be with her mother. An early interest in arts and crafts then led her to a year-long foundation arts course, before attending an undergraduate programme at the London College of Printing, which is part of the University of the Arts, London. By now, she had developed an interest in film cameras and started to gain some experience as a trainee on productions in the UK. A series of introductions and the benefit of a scholarship led her to the NFTS with an eye to becoming a cinematographer. After graduating, Annemarie has been consistently in demand, balancing her career with raising her family, thanks to the help of her mother and mother-in-law. She is a proud member of Illuminatrix and Women Behind the Camera. Her numerous awards include BAFTA, BIFA, and Star of Tomorrow. Annemarie is currently in production on the British TV drama series Bergerac. She lives in Sussex, England, with her husband Finn and 2 children. Annemarie, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, and thanks for having me.
Well, you're among friends, here, and I know you've listened to some shows with some colleagues of yours that you've got to know a little bit better.
Absolutely. It's lovely to be here with joining the lovely Ashley Barron and Sarah Moffat, who are also female cinematographers and part of the Illuminatrix, which is the female cinematography collective that I'm part of.
Yes, I noticed you were part of that. How long have you been with them?
I think I've been with the Illuminatrix for about 5 or 6 years, maybe pretty much from the early days of when they were starting. I knew Vanessa White, who is one of the co-founding members, because we were at the National Film School, not at the same time, but not far apart, studying cinematography with the same tutors. So we knew of each other. And she was forming the collective and invited me to join.
So this is something really is for women in the industry. This kind of collective and what we're doing here with the podcast is raising awareness of the work of cinematographers and women basically behind the scenes in all departments, because there's been, shall we say, an absence of support in the past. And hopefully these organisations are filling that void. Do you find that it's helping women in a supportive and an empowering way?
It's been a game changer. I was lucky enough when I was studying film at various different postgraduate places. So the National Film School was the key place that I went to, and I had a very good friend who studied there at the same time as me, a fellow female cinematographer called Sarah Bartle-Smith. So I always had her as a support network. But suddenly when Ness said, would you like to join us? And she's also a member. It was like we suddenly had loads of people we could turn to and ask questions rather than just each other. And it was amazing. It's really, really changed so much in that time, in the last few years, that you see so many people's careers evolving and growing, and anything feels possible now, whereas before it was a big mountain to climb.
Well, it seems like you're keeping very busy now. You're fresh off Tribeca with Outrageous. Congratulations. That must have been a wow moment for you in your career.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to have worked on a project such as Outrageous. It's done more than I ever imagined a TV show would do. And opening its global premiere at Tribeca Film Festival is a fantastic feat. And it's still kind of having its moment, certainly in the UK and in America. And I think it will have its moment in Europe. And yeah, hopefully people will see it.
Well, talking about strong women, there is a film all about, or a TV series about very strong women, but you're used to making films about strong women and supporting and empowering women. What was this that was different about this particular production, Annemarie?
Well, I'd known about Nancy Mitford, who is the eldest sister from the Mitford family. There's 6 sisters and 1 brother. So I'd read Nancy Mitford's books as a teenager, and my mother had given them to me to read and said, I think you'll enjoy these, when I was about 12 or 13. And her mother had given the books to her to read when she was about 12 or 13. And I just found them extremely captivating because it appealed to my sort of childish sensibility, but they were also seemed to be just daring and being bold and kind of said what they think. Even when I was growing up, the UK was still a place where my parents' generation would say things like, well, of course, when I was young, children were told to be seen and not heard. But I was just thinking, actually, these are my grandmother's generation, these ladies, and they don't give a damn, literally. And I just found them thrilling and rebellious. And I've always been extremely interested in family stories and family dramas, and I've always been drawn to that kind of world. And I enjoy a kind of light touch as well. I enjoy humour with the drama, just because I think that's just the sort of most amazing part of humanity, is if you can be in a kind of terrible situation, but you can find some sort of light in it or humour, and that's what Nancy did with great panache. Nothing was ever that serious. So reading about her actual life, rather than the dramatized version of her life that she'd sort of done a light autobiography, it was incredible just to see, wow, there was some extreme highs and lows, and not many people can come out of that unscathed and then write wittily about it. So it was extraordinary.
And you seem to like those period dramas. You've done Call the Midwife and All Creatures Great and Small. Very, very British, of course. And, that speaks to your background, of course.
Absolutely. I look back at the films that I was drawn to as a child, and, Merchant Ivory films. I mean, A Room with a View is a film that I watched on repeat. I won't say where I always got caught having the moment paused when my parents would come in. Nothing to do with a lake and men dancing around it with no clothes on. But anyway, I loved that film, and I just found it compelling. And actually, not having watched it for quite a long time and then revisiting it relatively recently, it's got so much in there, and yet it's funny. It really is. And it's kind of passionate and romantic. So I'm clearly a bit of a romantic, and I do love a bit of country houses and some great costumes. But actually, I loved Rebecca, the original Hitchcock movie. That was another film that I really enjoyed. It felt kind of dreamy. So there was a sort of suspense to that as well. So I Agatha Christie all over as well. Miss Marple, Joan Hickson as Miss Marple. I absolutely loved it. So yeah, I have to say I'm very drawn to those sorts of stories. But I'm also drawn to some very gritty stories as well that are contemporary. So, but I feel like I'm having quite a nice moment, and my 10-year-old self would be very pleased with what I'm doing at the moment.
I love that. And yeah, they are quintessentially English, aren't they? So which takes us back to your beginning, where you grew up in most charming and picturesque part of England. That's on the south coast in Devon, and had something of an idyllic childhood in a way, but you had some complicated family background, but you pulled yourself out of it and did what you wanted to do by the sounds of things. You went off to boarding school, and you sounds to me as if you became a strong, independent woman as a girl.
Yeah, it was a really interesting childhood. I definitely say I was very privileged. I was very lucky, had loving parents. They split up when I was 4, but I was still very much surrounded by a loving extended and step family. And we all lived in the same village. And so I had, lots of sets of parents, really, and a sister and a stepsister. And I had freedom. I used to go down to the woods with my friends and explore. I had dogs. So I definitely had that, you call it, childhood, and, very pretty villages, but also a village that was kind of beautiful old houses, but then a lot of 1970s houses. And we did live in one of those for a bit. That was a very brilliant and safe cul-de-sac that you could, I went down the hill on my tricycle many times and up again. And, so it was sort of mixing the old and the new. It wasn't all very old fashioned, but it was definitely, a childhood that I look back on and go, wow, I was lucky. I was really lucky. So that was very much the start of it. And boarding school was quite formative years when my mum was breaking up from another partner. My sister was already at a boarding school in Bath, and I was asked if I wanted to go, and I said yes, because I was quite into Enid Blyton, and it felt a bit like, another version of a very English sort of existence. And I went and definitely had some adventures and scrapes and made some really good friends, but I also left when I wanted to and when I wanted to be back at home. So, wanted to sort of fit into where my family or where my mum had moved to and know the people around me and be part of a community that I lived in.
So it sounds like a quintessential, charming English village life. And I'm wondering if, since you said there were dogs involved, were the ponies involved since you were in Devon?
My mum had a horse when I was about 8 till 12. And yes, I learnt to ride. So I can say I can ride. I'm not a very good rider anymore. I've tried it and was like, oh, I've waited. Yeah, there's been quite a large gap in between riding. But it's one of those things that if you can do it, you always know how to do it, but it might not be very elegant. So I definitely had, again, that very English middle class girl. I can ride and familiar with ponies and that kind of thing, but never actually looked after one or owned one. My mum had one at a stable, and she inherited. That's the kind of English thing. I've inherited a pony. It's very very English sounding. But not one of those. I didn't go pony mad. I wasn't one of those people that was a pony person. I enjoyed it, but sort of realised that that's quite consuming.
Tell me you read Black Beauty, though, Annemarie.
I did, and there was a lovely TV series, if I remember correctly, when I was growing up, and another one with horses that was called Silas, which I think I was more interested in because he would run along these massive beaches. And I'm not sure where it was filmed, but in my memory, it's in black and white, and it was very badly dubbed. It could have been Italian and maybe French. And he was about 10, and he just seemed to live with a pack of wild horses, probably in the Camargue somewhere in France. And I just remember going, that's pretty cool. I like that.
What was it called?
Silas Returns, something like that. Or maybe it was just his name was Silas, but he was wild. It was all kind of riding around with absolutely no saddle. I kind of look at that now and go, wow, that was a pretty interesting exercise. It would be very hard to achieve now with all the health and safety laws that are in place with children and stunts and horses.
Exactly. Well, International Velvet was shot down on the south coast of England, of course, and that would be very different now if they were filming that now. But I'm wondering if you were sporty, though. Were you a sporty child?
I was pretty average, or a bit above average. So I could always get along and, sort of remember bowling the Rounders team, which is like as you'll know, a sort of girl version of baseball. And I did do a bit of lacrosse at my boarding school. So that was very, not jolly hockey sticks, but very jolly lacrosse sticks, and pretty violent, actually. I remember everyone going for it. And so I never actually got into hockey after that because I just didn't like the bending down. I was like, I'd much rather, wave a stick around near someone's face. So that was quite fun.
Well, what did you enjoy doing as a child in school and with your parents? What kind of activities?
I was always allowed just to sort of make stuff. So my mum would just say, oh, here's a shoebox. Because I'd always ask for, like, a doll's house or there was My Little Ponies. And I'd be like, I want the house that you can get for the My Little Pony. And my parents were like, absolutely not. No way. You can make it yourself, though. So I was constantly making houses for various sort of toys and camps. So sometimes they'd be outside and it might be in a flower bed or in some long grass, bit of cardboard boxes, shoe boxes, wallpaper, bits of old carpet. We were always decorating and doing up houses. So we were kind of always living in a building site. So there was always stuff to make things out of. I was probably a bit more into the kind of interior decoration, whereas my sister was like properly with a saw, sawing up bits of wood. And then climbing trees, a lot of climbing trees, making camps in the woods, going messing about in a river, in wellies and losing wellies and, getting everyone wet and getting my friends stuck up trees that they couldn't get down. And yeah, definitely allowed a lot of freedom. And I had a cousin in Kent, or various cousins, and one of them had a pony or two ponies and orchards. So we actually did go and ride around, and I always got the slow horse, and we'd sort of do cops and robbers, but on horses. So kind of, yeah, bit of mixed metaphor there. So yeah, it was very kind of creative, but also outdoorsy, and a bit of sailing as well. So yeah, I have cousins that are really good sailors. I was not a really good sailor. My dad is a really good sailor. But I was chucked in little optimists and cadet boats and just told to get on with it, really. So I've sort of always been thrown in at the deep end, literally, and told to get on with it. But I wasn't necessarily the champion or anything at all. I was very not the champion in regattas and stuff. But it was good because I was told to have a go.
Well, being on the coast, you had access to it, of course, and your dad was a yachting photographer. So is that the beginning of your interest in photography?
Yeah, it is. It was something that growing up until I was about 13 or 14, I wasn't particularly interested in, because he had a dark room at home and it was always, don't come in here when the red light's on. So it was almost like out of bounds. And quite rightly, he was absolutely petrified. He didn't want us to ruin any of his work while he was mid-processing. So it was, also, again, it was if we were out and he was doing any photography, because often we'd be taken with him. So he started out photographing local regattas in Devon and Cornwall for dinghy sailings, but he managed to be in that generation where you could combine your hobby and make a career. which was yachting and photography. And so I even remember a couple of times having to drive his ribbed boat for him. I was about 12 or 13 because his driver hadn't turned up at a regatta. So just being told, okay, forward, reverse, back, go right, go this, and him just shouting instructions at me. And actually that was really probably the beginning of how it's like to be on a film set and direction that's just immediate and urgent and understanding what the person needs and why they need it. And for him, it was getting the best angle and the best light on the sails.
So he did that as a profession then, did he, the photography?
Well, we'd moved to the West Country in the first place with his previous career. He'd started out and was in the army all his life. And he got a posting that was in Plymouth. He was in the Royal Engineers, and he'd done all sorts of postings in Germany and in Salisbury, and he was in charge of lots of tanks. And then he got this job attached to the Royal Marines, and that's why we ended up in that actual area, because it was close to Plymouth. And during his time, probably, I think we'd been down there about 4 years, and he just decided that he wanted to pursue his passion. And yeah, he'd sort of grown up within an army environment because he was born in the war, but his parents were both served in the army in the war, but his father carried on. And I think he just thought, actually, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do the photography side of things and combine it with his passion for sailing, which he'd done a lot of in the army already. And I always used to ask him, why did you join the army? You know, if you like sailing, surely you'd join the Navy. He said, no, you get more of a chance to sail in the army. So that always baffled me as a child, but that's apparently the way of, if you want to sail small boats, join the army.
Okay.
So that was how we ended up down there. And going back to the kind of responsibility, it wasn't until I was a bit older, he probably just trusted me to hold the camera and not drop it and all of those sorts of things, when he was obviously starting out and building his own portfolio and career and reputation. And and I think he found it really interesting that I was interested in the more kind of arty side of things. One of the first sort of big photography projects I did was when I was about 15, looking at David Hockney and his cubist photography, where he would almost flatten out the image, taking a photo of the same thing but moving his perspective. And I did a couple of projects like that for school, and I just thought, this is really interesting. It sort of was more than what my father had been doing with the yachting photography. It was sort of another way of expressing myself, because I'd always been into, as I said, kind of arts and craftsy things and drawing, but I enjoyed this element and that angle.
So where did that lead you then? Were you able to get a movie camera then as a child and play with that?
No, I had a Canon stills camera and a pretty good 50mm quite fast lens, actually. And it wasn't until I decided to go to art college and do a foundation art course that I discovered moving image. I didn't really think about moving image. I watched a lot of videos because it was the day of the video player era of that. And when I was a teenager, I was, watching whatever the video shop had and arguing with friends and siblings about what we could watch or not watch. And it was also growing up, I didn't really have access to the cinema easily. It was quite a long bus journey away, and I didn't really get taken to the cinema. So where I found the most inspiring kind of films that I suppose then progressed me into my interest into film as a teenager was watching Channel 4 late at night when I was babysitting as a sort of 17-year-old, and Channel 4, a TV channel in the UK, used to show really interesting and eclectic variety of films, old and new.
So what was the appeal then? What were you watching? What genres were you drawn to?
Well, I suppose after kind of my original excitement with period drama as a child and interested in that, I remember watching Performance, the Donald Cammell and Nick Rogue. He was a cinematographer on it, but he obviously was to become a director in his as his career evolved. And I think I watched Walkabout as well when I was sort of a teenager and about to think about what I wanted to do in the future. And I didn't watch it going, oh, I want to make films. But I just remember watching it going, wow, I've really had to think about what that film's about. And it's not just a beginning, a middle and an end. You know, I kind of left with more questions than when I started watching it. And I enjoyed the cerebral side of it, but combined with the visuals. And my sister had gone and done a foundation art course in Exeter. And she was the one that said, well, why? I'm living in London now. She'd moved to London by that stage. Why don't you do a foundation art course in London and be near me? And she sort of just said, why don't you apply to St Martin's? So I just did. And it wasn't until I got to art college that I sort of explored the possibility of moving image and collaborating with people in a kind of greater way.
And then you went to the NFTC, the National Film and Television School in Beaconsfield, Hertfordshire. So you were close to London already. Was that a natural progression? Was that easy for you to move from one to the next? I actually did a degree course in between, which was still in London in the same building. So I did the 1-year course at St Martin's and then the 3-year course at the London College of Printing, which is now called the London College of Communication. And I think it's now under the umbrella of University of the Arts. So that was from the foundation and going, I want to work with like film. But yeah, from the foundation and wanting to work with film, that was my gateway into going, oh, there's other students who are making film in the same building, and that would be interesting to work with them. And I think someone said, oh, why don't you apply for the film course? It's upstairs. So I did. And again, they said, oh, well, if you in your interview, if you talk about politics and feminism, you'll get a place. And I was like, oh, really? So it was quite interesting that there was quite a radical course upstairs that I didn't really know about. So that's sort of what opened my eyes up to more political thinking and how filmmaking can change people's way of seeing and way of thinking. And I did 3 years on that course and really kind of honed down to saying I want to pursue it in the camera department. So how did your politics develop then, Annemarie, in those formative years? Because college life is where we start to get opinionated, don't we?
Absolutely. And I'd sort of been in a very non-political sort of world my parents were interested in, world politics, but it wasn't their main thing. So it was really eye-opening and really interesting meeting a lot of different people from all over the world who are international students. Obviously, London is a fantastic hub of meeting a lot of different people from all over the world. And, we had a tutor who'd spent many years making documentaries in Cuba and was extremely politicized about that. And then we had students who were from all over the Middle East, and they were kind of having dialogue with each other. And I just felt like I was just sort of surrounded by very interesting people that I wanted to listen to. So it wasn't like I was sort of at the forefront of it, but I think I was just absorbing it all and getting quite excited. And again, about the feminist side of the kind of debate, I was like, oh yeah, I haven't really thought about that. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's interesting. So it was a sort of slow emerging for me.
And did it inform the genre of film that you were gravitating towards then? Did it politicize you in a way in your creative approach to filmmaking?
Yeah, well, I think the whole sort of thought of, oh, I could work on documentary. That's interesting. I can explore a subject and go deeper with it. That hadn't really ever occurred to me as a sort of genre. So, you on the degree course, you was just told to go out with a camera and make a documentary about something. And it was very easy to do in London, go to different areas. I think I was living in the East End and film the street and all the different businesses on my street and all the different people in the market. And again, look at a bit of the fabric of the history of the area. So other people were making interesting films about their squats that they were living in and how they were being redeveloped for the King's Cross Eurostar terminal, and how that was an erosion of local history, and looking at kind of historic films that had been made in this tiny area of London. And so, yeah, it was very exciting times in that way. And London was moving fast in its development as well. So that was an interesting angle to look at. I'm like, oh, okay, we're living in quite fast times. It's sort of the late 90s and into the noughties. It's like London is changing quite fast as a city, and it's like kind of looking back but looking forward as well. So that was eye-opening to me and interesting, and kind of got my antenna going for, oh, what else is out there? And I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I left that degree course. So I realized I needed more training on how to work with a camera. And so I decided I'm going to go and work in the camera department and become a trainee. So that's what I did for a year and a half. And it was whilst I was doing that I met one of the first female cinematographers that I worked with, who there was only about 3 working out there at the time. And she's called Cinda Forshaw. And I was her camera trainee on a project called Kid in the Corner. And she had been to the National Film School and said, well, we should apply there. So again, it's been very much people that have led me down these kind of routes. It's not like I've had that vision from the beginning. It's been a bit of a windy road for me, and exciting because it's sort of unfolded in quite an organic way.
And I'm sure there are people asking, well, how did you finance this? We all have to find our way through college, and you did quite a bit of studying. Spent quite a few years, though. How many years in total were you studying?
A long time.
6, 7, 8?
Yeah, it was the time I was lucky to be part of that generation where your local education authority would pay for your your further education, so my foundation, and also your degree. And my parents helped me pay to live in London, and I also got jobs, one of them being at the Prince Charles Cinema. So that was another landmark of cinema in London, which showed reruns, and famously the Rocky Horror Picture Show every Friday night. So yeah, between sort of living in London on not much money, but also having parents that did help fund that, I won't lie at all. It was a mixture of that, and I suppose my wages were probably more like pocket money, really. I also got a scholarship to go to the National Film School. So yeah, I don't know how I would have funded that now. And I do advise people that that's not the only route if they're looking into how do I do this? How do I get my hands onto a film set and get involved? So it was a route that was available to me at the time. And I mean, I obviously had to earn the places to get there and do the interviews. But yeah, I was very, very fortunate that was that window in time where a lot of it was paid for by the government.
What year would that have been then when you graduated from your 3-year college degree in London before you went to an FT?
1999.
And what kind of student were you?
I was definitely a sociable student. I was enjoying what London had to offer at the time, and alternative culture, and going out to clubs, and drum and bass was a massive music scene that was emerging at the time. And yeah, so I worked hard and I played hard. So it was, yeah, it was definitely a kind of a creative time in London, and lots of ideas buzzing around, and interesting music and fashion. And it felt like, yeah, London was quite electric at that point. And lots of places were at the beginning of their regeneration. And I lived in Camden as well for a year. I lived in Mile End and the East End, and like bands like Pulp were singing about living in that area. So a kind of Britpop was big, but there was also electronic music and music videos going with that were really exciting. And it was at the time where small cameras were also just coming out, like small digital cameras, not necessarily fantastic quality, but people were starting to kind of make stuff that they didn't have to get all the kit. So yeah, it was a really quite exciting time to be a student in London. And I was also friends with a friend from boarding school, flat shared with someone who's become a good friend, and we both lived around the corner from each other in Camden. It's Matt Whitecross, who's the director. And he had, when he graduated at the same time as my film course from an English degree, UCL, he got a job at Michael Winterbottom's production company. So I used to sort of hang out with them and do a bit of second unit and pickups and just get to know Michael Winterbottom, who's a prolific filmmaker and really embraced the sort of digital format. So yeah, it was exciting. I was sort of felt like I was in a bit of a world where things were happening.
Were you starting to get ambitious then when you realised what was possible?
Well, I think because I was around people who were doing things that were exciting, and another friend who's a DOP who was at London College of Printing is a DOP called Balash Bolger, who he very much knew that he wanted to be a cinematographer when he started that course, and he went straight to the National Film School as well. And the first student shoot that I ever worked on was his graduation film there, and he was great at going, okay, this is how you load the film, this is what you do. And so I learned a lot from other students when I was there. And he's still somebody that I ring up and go, oh, I'm about to do this. What do you think? Have you got any bits of kit that you'd recommend? And so yeah, and other DOPs like David Radiker was around. I think he was shooting stuff at London Film School. And I think I might have assisted or ran on one of his student projects. So there was quite a lot of groups of people that you could move around in, and not necessarily stay at the fact just within your film school. If you just put your radar out, you can meet other students and tag along. So I did a lot of crewing on other people's shoots, and probably not the academic work wasn't focused on in quite the same way, because there was a bit of a split between the academic side and I found the academic side interesting, but I was hungry for just being on set.
But these were mostly with men then. Did you collaborate at all with women at those early stages of your career?
Not in the camera department, really. I had a very formative friend who was on my course in the same year, Karin, and she was from Sweden, and there's quite a lot of Scandinavian students, and they seemed to have quite a lot of support, well, more support than our government. So they really got kind of backing, and Karin was very good at kind of saying, look, I need this for my student film. And so she was a big influence, because she made me dissect her script with her and go, well, how would we shoot it? Well, how could we emphasize the emotion here and what's going on in the character's mind? So again, it was a really exciting time just to kind of meet other people who made me think more deeply about what I was doing, and kind of go, oh, I can push this, I can take it further. It's like sharpening a pencil, you know. So yeah, just learning not just from the tutors, but mostly from the students. And she had sort of lived in Italy and was a bit older than me, not much, but she'd lived a bit of a life beforehand and lived in Naples. And so I just thought, oh, that's exotic. You know, you've lived in various countries, not just one like me. So yeah, exciting.
And then what? When you were graduating, did you know what next?
Well, I got there's a book called The Knowledge that you could look up people's details before everything was online. And so I just got this book and looked at the DOP or cinematographer section, and I just started at A. And I think Cinders Forshaw and John de Boorman, the DOPs, were the only ones that returned my answer machine message and said, yes, I am looking for a camera trainee. So I got the job, as I mentioned, first with Cinders. And then I got the job afterwards with John de Boorman. And he was shooting features. And he said, well, I'm filming in Manchester. We've got a trainee, but it's a football film, and we could do enough trainee. So I went up there, and I was at that point in time where I had my sister's car. I didn't have a flat. I was staying on her sofa because I graduated by that time, and the parent support had sort of stopped by that point. And I was lucky enough that I had grown up in an area where I had to learn to drive, or was able to learn to drive, being in rural Devon. I think if your parents can afford to get you lessons, it's kind of convenient for them so they don't become a taxi service. And so I was just like, okay, I'll drive to Manchester for lunch. And he said, oh, yeah, carry on. And the crew were amazing. They paid my wages. And I was sleeping on the sound trainee's sofa, I think, up there. So it was kind of just a big adventure of sofa surfing and being on set and learning and being given some cash to sort of live off. And I was being fed, and I just needed petrol money, really. So the jump came when I got my last trainee job after a few other sort of smaller jobs on Tomb Raider, the first one, and kind of worked on that for a year, and with some of the same camera team, and amazingly got taken to Cambodia and Iceland, because often the camera trainee isn't taken to the exotic locations, and made a lot of coffee for the camera crew. I didn't manage to do much loading on the film or anything like that. I think it was that everyone was just like, no, we'll do our jobs and you can just support us. But I learned a lot by looking. And that was how I got most of my money to pay for the National Film School. And I'd been offered a place by that point and had done the interview process. And that was, I ended up as on a big bang on my kind of camera trainee work before kind of going into the sort of deeper work of learning about lighting and cinematography at the National Film School.
So what was coming next then after you graduated? Because that's a big moment when you realised you're really out in the world now.
Yeah, that was quite a sort of big moment of going, okay, what now? Because it wasn't like, I think it's a bit more streamlined now as a course. I had a fantastic tutor in the second year. It was Brian Defano, the cinematographer of Train Spotting and Shallow Grave, and he was great. He really just he believed in me. So I knew that I felt like if he believed in me, that I had an eye and imagination and quick thinking to be a cinematographer. I was like, well, I'm going to just keep pushing. So I did a lot of music videos and a lot of short films. And it wasn't really until, I don't know how long afterwards, but it was a good couple of years, and doing kind of stuff with the Michael Winterbottom production company and Second Unit and things like that. I then got in my first sort of TV job, which was a documentary series filming teenagers with gambling problems. So that was another, like, oh, okay, that was where I felt like the door was open for me at that point in time. I'd sort of tried to get into music videos, but it seemed difficult. The doors were not always that easy to open. But documentary seemed to embrace me. So I kind of threw myself in sort of with both feet, really.
What was that called?
It was called Teenage Gamblers. And it was a strand that was for new directors. So there was quite a lot of good schemes at that point in time where it was like giving placements to sort of new people out in the industry. And there was also some short drama little slots as well. And that was it, all on Channel 4.
Because I've noticed you had some early credits in the early 2000s for some shorts. Voyagers, Lost and Found, After Years of Walking.
Yes, After Years of Walking was with a director that I'd met at the National Film School who was in the documentary department. And she was from Belgium, Sarah Van Act, and she's still doing really interesting work in Brussels. She does sort of documentary and video art. And she was looking into the effect of colonialism on Rwanda. So our graduation film was in Rwanda. And we looked at how the kind of divide and conquer that had been happening in Africa and especially in Rwanda by the Belgians had been the precursor to the genocide. So it's a pretty heavy subject. So 2 students going out with a little camera. We went out there and filmed in some quite incredible places, like rehabilitation camps they were, of people that had been the killers on the Hutu tribe who'd been killers in the genocide. And this is 8 years after the genocide. And we got access to some pretty incredible places, I think because we just looked like young students and weren't taken very seriously. And then we went out again after we graduated to do another film that was looking at children and how their play and their imagination had been completely, I suppose, the world of war was just immersed in their imaginative play.
So how were you feeling about other genres then when you realised at the beginning that documentaries was something that you had a passion for and a talent? How did you regard other genres and how you needed to branch out as a cinematographer?
Well, I remember saying to Sarah when we were filming on our last day of filming in Rwanda and going, this has really been an incredible experience. I've been places and seen things that I just couldn't have even imagined. And it's all because you turn up with a little camera in your hand and people want to talk to you. And it made me feel very grounded and just very privileged. And it made me go, well, I need to hold on to this feeling in whatever I do, because it's a real gift. And I think, that has sort of been something that I've got to find an intention and a reason for what I'm doing. So even in my moments of doubt where I'm like, I'm not necessarily working on big dramas. This is a long time ago, and other friends were sort of moving up the ranks in the drama world a bit faster, and I was maybe doing smaller sort of documentary projects. I was like, but this is where I probably need to be right now, and it's okay. And so I'd have one that was the voice of doubt, and then my inner voice just reminding myself, okay, this is okay. This is part of my journey, and I'm really enjoying it. So be on this journey.
So would you consider yourself an extrovert then, and fairly confident about your abilities at that time in your formative years?
I think I've always been someone that just gets on with it. And if I start thinking too hard, I might start thinking myself out of it. So I just shut that part of my brain off. So I'm an extrovert for sure. But I do, of course, like most humans, have that imposter syndrome that goes, what am I? Or I'll be looking over my shoulder going, but they're doing that. Why aren't I doing that? And then I need to just redirect my brain and say, that's okay. It's, So there is a little bit of conflict, but I think I've learned not to listen to that, actually, because I didn't find it very helpful.
How about now? Because obviously you've had a string of successes. It would seem, and you're fresh off Outrageous, back from doing the film festival circuit, and you're back at work. Does it seem now that you're not ever not working? Is there always something?
No, I do have little periods where I'm not working, but I really embrace that because I've got a family, a husband and 2 kids. And sometimes you just go, well, this is me being able to have this family time. I've got to cherish it. So, yes, I'm fortunate. I'm very fortunate that I've got a husband who also works in the industry and he's got a staff job, but he's in post-production sound. So I very much owe the fact that I can take little breaks in work. I don't often turn things down, so I'm not in that much of a demand, but I'm very fortunate that I've been able to grow my career. And I've very much focused on the drama side of things in the last 10 years with doing a little bit of documentary work because the schedules are finite and having a family and needing to know your timetable was something that was very clear when in the early days of having my son, who's now about to turn 14, when the documentary work would expand and I couldn't really work that with the childcare. So that's why I kind of went, okay, at this point in time, I think I need to just focus on the drama and then I'll know where I am with what I need to do with the childcare.
Because that is a challenge, isn't it? Having a career and balancing family life as well, especially with the travel that you need to do. And you're on location now.
Yes, it really is. And I couldn't have done it without my husband and my mother and my mother-in-law. Like that, my career would not be possible without their support and kind of just absolutely willing to help with the childcare and be there for my children and really be second kind of and third mothers. So I feel like I've been so fortunate to have that support because without it, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
So you told me your husband is in the business, but how did you meet?
We met through my best friend from school, at secondary school in Devon. And she went to the conservatoire in Birmingham and it's a 4-year course. So she was there the same amount of time as me on my degree. She stayed back a year because she had an injury. And she said, oh, there's this guy I think you'll really like. And I was like, yeah. And a few months later, cut to we're together and we've been together ever since. So she knew me very well.
So you've known each other how long?
Since 1999.
And when did you get married?
We got married in 2008. So yeah, it wasn't an immediate thing. We just sort of evolved and lived together from early on and lived in shared houses with like lots of different friends. And then we were like, maybe we should live by ourselves for a bit. And after about a year of living by ourselves, it sort of accelerated that we got cats and then he proposed. So yeah.
And so was he then particularly supportive of you going into the industry, doing what you wanted to do as a cinematographer then? So if he was in post, he was on a different side of things. But how much did that help, having a partner at the formative stages of your career?
Well, he wasn't in that industry at that point in time. So he was doing a music degree with my friend and he was doing viola, sort of for classical performance and orchestral work. And then I think he realised he didn't want to go into that. So he ran a bar in South London for several years while he worked out what to do when I was at the National Film School. And it was my friends that I'd slept on their sofas on the Manchester job. There was 2 sound trainees on that who said, oh, there's this job working in post-production. Are you interested? And because he's kind of got the musical side and very musical, it was a sort of really interesting and very easy transition for him to go into the world of sound editing. And he's also from a family where his father is an actor or was an actor because he's now not with us. And I suppose he was very used to the fact that his dad had died and was part of the Royal Shakespeare Company. So I met him and I was very kind of like, wow, your family are all so busy. This is exciting. So that was another kind of strand of meeting very sort of supportive people that were friends of his who were also in the industry, and actors and new directors and things. And they were always interested in what I was doing and what stage I was at and what short films I was working on. And, you know, so I had another kind of side of the family that gave an extra level of support and yeah, kind of insight into the industry.
So now at this point in your career, what are you looking for in your work?
I suppose I've got to really connect with the characters that I'm going to be filming when I'm reading the script, connect with the story, and feel like there's an angle that I can really go, I understand that, and I can express that through the lighting and the camera movement and really pull out this story. So that's what I always kind of look for, is just like, do I want to carry on reading this? Do I want to see this world? And is this sort of making my synapse buzz? And it's the same with documentary. It might not be like I'm kind of going, look, this well presented to you in a script. I met the director, Ella Glendinning, must be 5 years ago now, maybe 6, who's a documentary director. And she was introduced to me through Vanessa White from the Illuminatrix's mother. And she lived on the South Coast close to me and was looking for a DOP to work with, to film her in her sort of journey looking at, she basically wanted to find somebody else who'd had the same sort of experience in the world as her, because she's a wheelchair user. She has got very short femurs, so her experience of the world has been very different from anyone who's sort of, I suppose, classed as able, if you like. And it was an amazing meeting. And I just went, wow, I want to know more about this interesting woman. I've met her and I want to hear what she has to say about her experience in the world. And we shot a film that was supposed to only take a few months, but ended up taking 4 years because of COVID and various other things. But it's a film that I've, feel extremely passionate about, and I've learned so much working on it. So again, I just have to be drawn into the subject matter or the main character, whether that's a real person or one on paper.
How would you describe your style and your work now, Annemarie, and how do you think other people describe it?
I suppose there's always been an emotional element and an energy to it, and I think variety. But I've worked with a male director a couple of times who just said, I just think, you've got a different eye. And I think that's partly being a woman and how I emotionally connect to a story. But it's really hard to say. I think I would say it's very character-led. It's taking you on I'd like to say that you take your audience with you on a journey that they didn't expect, and it has twists and turns and highs and lows. So I think, there's a real emotion and energy to it, and sort of zoning in on maybe the small details as well as the massively broad tapestry or landscape that you're looking at.
Where do you think now that your most satisfaction comes from?
Creatively, I think the satisfaction comes from exploring a story and seeing if I can kind of surprise myself and not just go, oh, I did that on the last project, and just constantly evolving and pushing my own boundaries and going, oh, can I even do that? Or, building a really interesting team of people around me if it's a drama, and being surprised, I think.
And are your children interested in what you do?
Yes and no. For about 10 minutes. And then, it's like, oh, okay. And they're too interested in what they're doing. So I don't blame them. But I think I think they are. I think it's just normal to them, like anybody who has a parent in kind of the arts. I think it's like, yeah, it's just normal. They go off and do this, and oh yeah, I can see it on the television, or oh yeah, I met this person because my mum's working with them. Or I think as they get older, they'll have that hindsight. But I think children are just children. You don't really reflect for quite a long time.
And so now what do you do to relax at the end of the day, if there is time, beyond the family? Is it going to the movies?
I'm a member of BAFTA, so if I can get to the movies, I live in a semi-rural area, so I've definitely turned into my parents. And after years of living in London, I'm really lucky that I live close to the Opera House Glyndebourne and kind of have access to that amazing world and landscape. So going to the opera is a newfound and incredible thing that I love doing, and just somehow gives me something else that satisfies me, that's immediate and live and very different. My son's getting really into going to gigs, so is my daughter. So going to see live music is really exciting because that's sort of new on the horizon. But walking, swimming in the sea, being in nature, but yeah, definitely watching what I want to watch on TV as well.
And does that mean that you get to play what you want to play in the car?
Not always. It has to be a long journey by myself, so it depends. But there's a lot of music choices that happen in the car, a lot.
You have quite a variety of music taste, don't you?
Definitely eclectic. It's, I love classical music. My husband has really introduced me to a very broad world of classical music. He's really into the romantics. We went to Finland recently because of Sibelius and listened to all of his work while we were out there for 8 days. And we also saw the ice melting, or heard the ice melting on the lakes, and it was incredible. It was sort of a mixture of whale song and ambient music and understanding the majesty of his work. I've always loved a bit of disco. I think that's from my mum. So that sort of evolved into kind of modern pop singers. Like I saw Dua Lipa last weekend at Wembley with my daughter and loved it. And like dance music, drum and bass back from the 90s, that was a big thing. Don't listen to it so often these days, but it's definitely presses a button. And I love real sort of Americana as well. So, from Neil Young to Crosby, Stills and Nash to a bit of Dolly. So yeah, Fela Kuti as well. I went and filmed at Calacuti in Nigeria for a documentary for Al Jazeera English back in 2008, and that was live, filming with Fela Kuti's son Shayan and filming him perform at the Shrine. That was an amazing experience. So Afrobeat, I was just like, wow, why haven't I heard this before? So yeah, very eclectic.
Well, finally, can you tell us anything about what you're working on now or in the future? Or is that still under wraps?
No, I can talk about what I'm working on now. It's series 2 of the remake of a TV show that was around when I was growing up called Bergerac. So it's a detective show. And
oh, yes, I loved Bergerac.
Yeah, so I have very fond memories of watching that. And its new incarnation is really exciting. And the lead, Damien Maloney, is wonderful. So I'm very much enjoying that. And I'm filming back in Devon. Don't tell anyone. A bit of Devon and Jersey gets mixed up. So I'm, revisiting some old haunts at the moment, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. Yes, that was a lovely series, that was, wasn't it? We're going back a while, though.
Absolutely, yeah. In 80s into the 90s.
Well, that must be fun to do. I envy you that, and some lovely scenery as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I feel like there's a bit of a full circle moment happening, which is, again, my teenage self is probably smiling at me quite excitedly.
Wonderful. Well, the best of luck with that and future projects, Annemarie. And thank you so much for taking time to come on the podcast.
So nice to meet you, Chris, and thank you very much for having me.
And don't forget to hop over to our YouTube channel, where Annemarie and I continue our conversation. You'll find us at The Art Podcast. That's art with 2 A's. And while you're on your podcast app, don't forget to scroll down where you'll find the show notes and links to Annemarie's website, to her social media, and to her IMDb profile. You'll also find a link to our Instagram account and also our email address. If you'd like to reach out to us with any suggestions for guests on the show, we would love to hear from you. And as always, we'd love it if you spend a moment to give us a 5-star rating and review on your Apple Podcast app, if that's where you're listening. And if you're on Spotify, you can also leave a review there too. And if your world is film and television, you can find us on a separate podcast now. Call Time is just for women behind the camera in film and television. We go behind the scenes to get to know these women, from camera operators, cinematographers, of course, to makeup artists, to casting directors, stunt women, and costume, any of the thousands of women who work behind the scenes. Again, that podcast is called Call Time, and you'll find it on any podcast app. Be sure to follow this podcast or Call Time with anyone you think might enjoy these shows. As always, we appreciate you taking the time to support us, because we know how many podcasts there are out there from which to choose. Once again, my thanks to my guests this week, Annemarie Lean-Vercoe, and to you for listening. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time when my guest will be the Hawaiian-based muralist Jana Reggio. So I do hope you'll join me then.